Hello students and welcome to the second video on LO2 2023. In this video we will be looking at an explainer on question 2. If you're looking for something that you might want or you have a question about question 1, please look at our previous video, video 1. And if you just want to know how to mark your paper, then you can look at the next video, which is video 3 and the last video in the series. Okay, so let's get stuck into question 2. Okay, if you cannot see, then I think the best plan is for you to actually download the question and the solution as we go through it today, because I am currently fully zoomed in and I can't zoom in any more on my side. So we're going to start off looking at question 2. Question 2 is for 5 marks, 10 minutes. We'll start with the required. Okay, so let's read the required. The required says write an email. So immediately we know that we have to have an email format to Ms. Plant, the Director of Plants for Africa, in which you discuss the reasons with reasons whether you agree or disagree with the proposed accounting treatment by Mrs. Plant's nephew to recognize the intended bonus payments to the staff in January 2023. Your discussion should be based on the accrual basis of accounting. So we need to use that last part of the required as a checklist. Have we covered the accrual basis of accounting? Also notice the examiner has used the words only based on the accrual basis of accounting, which means we should limit our discussion, making sure that we don't discuss anything more than what has been asked for. Now let's have a look at the note. The note says you need to specifically comment on the correctness of the proposed journal entry. So we must have a statement either indicating this is correct or incorrect in our solution. We also need to, if applicable, we should present any correct journal entries, right? All calculations need to be shown with cross-referencing, and we must assume that all amounts are material. Okay, great. Let's go and read the information provided for us in the question. Okay, it starts off by saying Plants for Africa, or P4A, is a retail nursery located in Centurion, Gauteng. The entity was started in 2020 by the only shareholder, Ms. Plant. Ms. Plant is also the only director of Plants for Africa. Okay, the entity has a 31 December financial reporting date. On the 20th of December, the 12th of December 2022, so in the prior year, just before year end, Ms. Plant decided that all 12 staff members of P4A would receive a 1,000 Rand cash bonus payment for their hard work during 2022 financial reporting period. Okay, so the bonus payment is for the hard work that has been done and concluded during the 2022 financial year. Okay, so the bonus payment relates to work done in 2022. That's clear coming from this statement. Following this decision, she announced the intended bonus payment to all staff members on the 13th of December 2022. So the next day, she announces this to staff, which means there's no turning back for P4A because the staff now know about the bonus. They cannot, P4A cannot then decide later on not to pay it. So therefore, there's definitely some sort of liability that is existing because now they've made an expectation on the part of the workers that they will get this payment, and if they don't get the payment, then they're not going to be happy. So that's what that statement is saying, that there's an expectation created and therefore this company has to follow through with this payment. So a liability has been created on P4A's part. P4A does not have an accountant. Instead, the financial records are maintained by Miss Plant's nephew, who had completed grade 12 accounting. So clearly now we're dealing with someone who does not have the requisite skills, because only grade 12 accounting was completed. After a short discussion with her nephew, Ms. Plant is convinced that the intended bonus payment should not be recognized in the financial statements for the year ended 2022, which means so there should be nothing in the financial statements that indicate that this payment needs to be made. Now that is not congruent. It's not, doesn't match what we just read in the statement above, where it says the cash payment was for work done in 2022. So Ms. Plant's nephew is saying, even though the work was done in 2022, we shouldn't say that the payment that relates to the work that was done in 2022 existed in 2022. Now, we need to just think about that as a concept. It then says this decision was taken because P4A will only pay the bonuses to the staff in January, which falls in the 2023 financial year. Below is a screenshot of the only journal entry that Ms. Plant's nephew suggests that P4A recognizes in January. So now they've presented us with something that it's going to be recorded in the 2023 financial year. Okay, so let's have a look. It says debit bonus expense credit bank. So this is basically recording the payment of the bonus. That is what we're looking at currently, just the payment. So what do we need to do first off? When we start a question like this, we want to make sure that we've got the easy marks down first. So for example, we want to look at our format. So the format here for an email should have a to with an email.com or a gmail.com ending there, and a from. We then need a subject that briefly describes what we want to talk about, and then some pleasantries like, this is in regard to the bonus payment that you asked about. Please have a look at my detailed discussion in Appendix A, and please make sure that you contact me. And then we must always sign this as student or accountant. We never sign with our own name. We always sign as student or accountant. Okay, now let's have a look at the next part of our answer. So when we're actually answering, we need to follow what is called the TAC system. So what is the TAC system? The system, we must always talk about the theory, the application, and then have a conclusion that links back to what we discussed in application. So that's what we need to look for. When it comes to the accrual principle of accounting, you guys would remember we discussed this in detail in class, and we said the accrual basis of accounting is that we record the effect of transactions and events are recorded in the period that they occur. And I told you in class, we need to look for what's called an originating event, an event that gave rise to the income or gave rise to the expense, and then identify when did this event happen, right? And then we journalize or we record the asset, liability, expense, income, whatever, in the period that the event that gave rise to these accounting elements took place, right? So that is what that first theoretical part is talking about. The next part is saying even if the cash flows have happened in a separate period, which is technically what we're dealing with. Because if we think about it, the cash flows here are happening in January, right? Which is a separate period, but the event didn't happen in January. Let's apply what we've said. So the bonus payment, what is the originating event for the bonus payment? What gave rise to the bonus payment? Where did the bonus payment come from, right? So if we think about this, we'll realize that the bonus payment has risen because of the work done, right? Because of the work done by employees, right? Because clearly in the question, have a look at the question again, guys. We go back. The question says the bonus payment is in relation to work done during the 2022 financial period. So, for our purposes, the originating event took place in 2022. And further to that, the announcement of the bonus payment also took place in 2022. So, regardless of whether you got the originating event wrong as a student, you should know that both events, not only the work, but also the announcement, both happened in 2022. So, the originating event took place in 2022. Therefore, the expense was incurred and should be created in 2022. That means that we should be recording this expense in 2022, even though the payment, so now we're moving on to the next step, which talks about when the cash flows happen. Even though the payment happens in January, this does not change the date at which we need to recognize the expense, because the originating event and therefore the expense that was incurred in 2022. Now, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that in our conclusion, we have and we use the note, which was written so nicely up for us. We make sure that we follow the note and answer all the questions in the note. So in the note, it said, make sure that you comment on correctness, make sure that you indicate or show any journal entries. If there's calculations, show cross-referencing, and make sure that we cover all amounts in the question. Okay, so let's have a look at what this would look like. The first is we should tell them what we believe needs to happen. So they need to recognize the expense in 2022, which therefore means that Mrs. Plant's nephew is wrong. Now that answers the first point of the note. The note says talk about the correctness, right? Talk about the correctness. Now the next part of the conclusion is a part where marks weren't awarded, but it's important for us to take note of what happened, right? So even if you didn't have this part, not to worry, but for future, you need to be analyzing it from the perspective of the elements. So from the perspective of the elements, we had a expense. If we followed Mrs. Plant's nephew's accounting treatment, we would have understated our expenses. We also, because we're raising this expense in 2022, our contra would have been a liability, you see. Our contra would have been a liability. So therefore, if we don't raise this in 2022, we're also understating our liabilities, which means our liabilities and our expenses are too small. The word understating means something is too small, right? So overstatement means something is too big, understatement means something is too small. So we would be understating expenses and liabilities in 2022 if we did not or if we did follow Mrs. Plant's nephew's accounting treatment. Now, you notice that the note also asked us, if applicable, for any correcting journal entries. And so this is what we would have processed in 2022. Remember, we said we need to recognize this in 2022. So this is what our journal entry would have been in 2022. We would have had a debit expense. We can call that bonus expense. If you called it salaries, it's okay. It's not correct, because the salaries generally are something that is agreed with in a contract, whereas bonuses often are at the discretion or performance of a discretion of the employer or the performance of a worker. So it's slightly different to a salary, but nonetheless, if you said salaries, it's okay. So bonus expense, and then we should have raised a liability, because we can't say credit bank because it's not paid in December, it's not paid in 2022. So we would have had to realize that we have to raise a liability or an accrued expense is another word to say it, another way to say it, an accrued expense for this specific expense that we need to pay. So that's what it would have been. If we had to calculate the amount, it would have been 12 employees, which we were told in the question, and 1,000 Rand each, and our amount should have been 12,000 Rand. Okay, so that is what our solution should have looked like. That's the explanation behind it. Remember, guys, with this type of question, we had to look for the originating event and find out when that happened. When did the originating event happen? And therefore, the accounting needs to simply follow, right? Simply follow whatever the originating event was. Okay, guys, thank you. This was a short video because it was a short question, but thank you for listening in. And do come back for video 3, in which we will discuss the marking process of LO2 2023. Thanks, guys, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.